thankful to 10 Smart to allow us to bring this large delegation on stage at the same time. As a proud Tennessee company, we are also very eager and anticipative of all the momentum we're seeing through organizations like 10 Smart and other public sector and academia bodies in the state. Being a major employer and a business in Tennessee, I think we have a vested interest in seeing smart mobility grow and flourish in the state of Tennessee. And again, I couldn't be more excited about what we've heard here over the last couple of days. You know, we talk a lot about innovation at FedEx, and for good reason. It is a company that was founded on the idea of innovation, starting with the concept of overnight delivery itself, to the concept of the tracking number, to actual online transactional tracking of packages, to things like devices like SensorWare that can track the condition of a package and its contents in real time, something that has been tremendously helpful in the massive vaccine distribution efforts that we undertook in the last couple of years. FedEx DataWorks is a new entity that's taking that package insight work to new heights, creating new solutions for our customers, creating new insights for our operations, and in continuing that work of bringing unprecedented, not just unprecedented speed to our transportation networks, but also unprecedented visibility for us and for our customers. And then the next frontier, we believe, for us, and it's already here, is the massive efforts that we're planning to undertake in terms of fleet electrification as well as automation. So while innovation is not the responsibility of any particular group in FedEx, it's everyone's job, and there are dozens of teams working on innovative ideas across the company. A lot of the people represented here today focus on three main areas for the entire enterprise, and those are robotics, electric vehicles, and autonomous vehicles. So we're going to focus today on the latter two. As I said, the Autonomous Vehicles Center of Excellence, it's an enterprise team based at FedEx Corporation that is responsible for leading all AV-related projects across all transportation segments, from first mile, last mile, and middle mile, and even some of the in-facility AV projects. So we got to start, obviously, with the why. You know, why is it important? I believe that significant automation in logistics is inevitable because of four major factors that are in play here. One is that the opportunity size is tremendous. It is U.S. business logistics is 7 to 8% of the national GDP, and of that, 81% comes from transportation, road transportation. So we're talking about numbers as big as $1.5 trillion in terms of opportunity size. 30 to 40% increases in driver-related costs. It's across the industry, something we've seen, and that might actually even be a little bit outdated because these numbers are about 6 months old. And we do believe that the driver shortage, which existed even before the pandemic, is continuing to grow. And the one number that was projected was by 2028, we will be short at least 160,000 drivers, right? So I don't think I need to emphasize the challenges that we're having to anybody in this room. I'm sure you're all familiar with that. Third is massive productivity gains are possible. 40 to 60%, and particularly focusing in on road transportation, 40 to 60% of our road transportation costs are driver-related. And that's just the beginning, because every warehouse, every cross-dock facility, every store location went through a planning process that involved, in some way or the other, the consideration of how, you know, the range of a truck typically, and how long does it take to ship goods via truck today with rules and constraints around how far a driver can go, rest requirements, so forth. And when you take that away, then everything changes. And so we're going to, the driver costs, the salaries and wages and benefits are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of when it comes to productivity gains. Finally, we do believe that the technology is feasible and the challenges are solvable. AV technology is extremely complex and it's not 100% there, but we believe that with smart application and gradual expansion of the operating design domain of where we introduce AVs, that this, and definitely it's a partnership game, with industries, AV companies, governments, and other agencies working together, we can solve the remaining challenges. So talking a little bit more about the challenges, what are those? I'm sure many people in this room are familiar with several of these. So technology is one. We have still room to go in terms of both the hardware, the software when it comes to artificial intelligence, sensor technology, connectivity, so forth. The regulatory front is still quite a bit of a patchwork of state, local, and federal laws that we still have to navigate and need standardization in. The areas where we focus a lot is operations, how do we need to adapt our operations, what new processes we need in order to successfully deploy autonomous vehicles, what is the systems infrastructure we need to manage autonomous fleets. Those are the questions that we work on the most right now. And then there are commercial considerations. How do we take this to market, societal acceptance, consumer and customer acceptance, and so forth, and risk management. How does our risk management team think of risk and insurance and data privacy and so forth? Those are some big challenges. But as I was saying, we do have a picture in mind on how these technologies will deploy, and we started, our initial project started with in-facility movement of goods, small AMRs, switchers and hostlers that operate within the yard. And then we started with the Roxo project, which is our hyper-local last-mile delivery robot, which we think that, with Roxo and other companies out there, that they are already successfully doing deliveries. That is a much more controllable environment and therefore much more feasible. Then comes middle mile, and we believe that's next. Middle mile, line haul, big trucks on highways. Highways, as you can imagine, are a relatively more controllable environment for trucks to operate in, and that's where a lot of our current pilots are focused on. And then finally, the large area, citywide level 4 last mile. That's still 8 to 10 years away, depending on who you ask. Now, as one of the speakers was saying yesterday, we agree that logistics is going to be the first real instance of application of AV technology. And we've seen that from the industry. We've seen a lot of AV companies pivot from robo-taxi ambitions to focus more on goods delivery, and that's with good reason. So I get asked this a lot, are you guys doing your own R&D when it comes to autonomous? Are you working with universities? Well, we don't do, AVs is an extremely complex area of technology. It is a specialist game, right? So we partner with the best that are out there in developing the core AV technology. Where do we focus on are these three areas. Operations, finding those strategic surgical opportunities within the operations where we can successfully deploy autonomous vehicles. And creating the necessary operational changes and processes that will be needed, the operating business models that will be needed to do that. On the technology front, the AV Center of Excellence is one of their key responsibilities is to keep a deep awareness of what's going on in the industry, state of business, state of technology, and who's doing what, and then creating, developing, and maintaining those strategic relationships with the technology companies. And then finally, innovation, the art of getting it done, right? That's the hardest part. So we believe we have a bias for action and trying things out in the real world as opposed to a lot of analysis. When it comes to these kind of complicated, complex, futuristic technologies, I think that the more complex it is, the simpler your approach needs to be. So if we're not sure about something, we want to go try it in the field and learn from that and move on. And this is, speaking of simple framework, this is a framework that guides innovation, trial and error work across much of the company. And it's really simple. It comes down to two things. Think widely. Look for those opportunities that are at the intersection of what's desirable for our customers in terms of value proposition and experience, what's profitable for the company, and what's possible from a technology standpoint. Once we have those opportunities, we just want to go out there and try it. We have what we call our quality-driven management process that everybody from the intern to a veteran at the company is familiar with and is trained in being able to do that. So some examples of our public autonomous vehicle initiatives. We started with Roxo, the FedEx on-demand delivery bot, almost 3 years ago, and it's still a thriving project. We're taking the last mile automation a little bit further with our package delivery initiative with Neuro out of California. We've been doing trials in the Houston area for a while now, and this fall we're planning to expand that, take it to the end customers. And then also in the line haul space, we have a strategic partnership with Aurora Innovation, and we have an ongoing pilot in Texas, and we're building our strategic roadmap together for commercialization within the next, I don't want to give a date here right now, but within a reasonable time frame. So before I hand off to my colleagues here, I just wanted to end with a little video here that we did in the test we are doing with Neuro in Houston. We recently did a small customer experience study. We were just curious about what is it that the customers have to say about the experience of getting their packages delivered by a robot, right? We weren't sure at all. We had no preconceived notions. In fact, we were kind of apprehensive going into this. But we got some really great feedback, and let's take a look at that. So cool was the operative word in all the subjects that we had in this test. That was the most repeated word. And that gives us a lot of confidence in that we are on the right track. Now, we did get other feedback, and we were surprised by how people perceive this to be not just a convenient option, but a safer option for their deliveries, and it gives them a greater degree of confidence, and even for pickups, where they're returning a package or something, that they feel like they have a greater degree of confidence that it will get to its destination compared to dropping it off at a store or something. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to my colleague Darren here, who will talk a little bit more about line haul work.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Hopefully everyone can hear me. And When we talk about cool, we usually don't talk about trucks, but I'm going to talk mostly about trucks today. I'm a manager in the Autonomous Vehicle Center of Excellence at the FedEx corporate office. And the mission of my team is pretty interesting. And my team, for that matter, are also pretty interesting people. We have folks who have a lot of frontline experience in operations. I have a person who has spent her entire career basically doing IT development, and especially with the agile development process the last decade or so. Other people from procurement, operations research, and the like. What you won't see on that list is anything to do with artificial intelligence, computer vision, et cetera, because although we're working with autonomous vehicles, we're working with, as Nick said, some of the smartest people in the world with autonomous vehicles, and we're not, purporting to develop our own. We want to work with the companies who are best at that. My job, one of the two missions we have, is integrating those with our operations and with our systems. And the reason why that's complicated is if you think about when a FedEx van, or for that matter, a truck pulls up to a facility, usually there's a person who gets out of the vehicle, they walk the package up to your door, they knock on the door, they scan the package, they might collect a signature all on a handheld device and get back in the vehicle. If you have an autonomous robot or a truck pulling up to your place of business, there's no person. So there's no person to do that walking, that knocking, the interaction with the customer, there's no handheld device. And so trying to move things from the autonomous vehicle into our systems and being able to basically replicate all those steps electronically is basically one of our big challenges. Because we have great IT systems that, again, record the over 10, 15 million deliveries a day, all the tracking requests and so forth, whether it's on FedEx.com, your mobile device, and so on. None of that exists today hooked into an autonomous vehicle, let alone a potential portfolio of autonomous vehicles in the future. And so that's half of our mission. The other half has to do with trucks. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about trucks now. So when we talk about trucks, in this case, we're talking about middle mile line haul, so Class 8 tractor trailers that are driving on the highway between our facilities. And one of the things that's interesting about it from our perspective working at the corporate office is we have that in at least 3 different operating companies that actually operate all our own trucks. So we have that with FedEx Ground, the fastest growing delivery company in America, bring lots of stuff to everybody's homes and businesses, surely. We also have that with FedEx Freight, America's largest less than truckload provider, and also even with FedEx Express, although the world's largest cargo airline, still a lot of trucks backing up and providing redundancy to that system as well. So we're able to look at this, get expertise from across these different operating companies, and also kind of pick and choose to some degree where we want to pilot and test with, which is kind of cool. The reasons why we're interested in autonomous line haul, Nick's already touched on those. Driver shortage, as much as we are really good at developing and recruiting drivers, is starting to get to us as well. Not as much as some of the other providers, but it is a major issue. And particularly, one of the reasons that we've generally done a little bit better than that in the industry at large is that a lot of our drivers, most of our drivers, almost all of them, are driving and coming home every night. We don't do a lot of long-haul trucking. If we do, it's because we're passing a trailer from one hub to the next hub to the next hub to the next hub. If it's really long haul, we might also use railroads for part of that. But it's pretty interesting because those are also the hardest lanes to staff, are the ones that are team drivers and the longest lanes. That's also the most interesting opportunity for having a truck with no driver and no hours of service and able to drive for 12, 16, 18 hours straight, maybe put a little diesel in it and keep going again. And there's been some interesting trials by some of the autonomous trucking companies the last year or so trying to prove whether a truck can drive for 5 days straight, and the answer, by the way, is yes. So that's pretty interesting. There's obviously also cost savings. Again, at least 40% of the cost of trucking goes directly back to the driver, their benefits, training, domiciling, et cetera. So there's some financial benefit there. The other point with that also is that an autonomous truck is going to drive very calmly and sedately, and you're going to save fuel just because you're going to be in the right-hand lane, driving 65, not aggressively passing someone who's driving 64, and trying to do what's safe and calm and reasonable instead of trying to hurry and try to make your hours of service your cutoff. And so there is actually a surprising amount of fuel savings possible with that, even though the trucks are completely conventional, aside from the autonomous driver. In addition, there's also the opportunity to skip some of the meet points and handles and moving those trailers between trucks at hubs and stuff as well. And then finally, the biggest thing for us, one of our slogans at FedEx that you'll see plastered over everywhere inside of operating facilities is safety above all. And our hope And for that matter, kind of the best way to put it is our demand, probably, of a lot of the companies we're working with, whether it's in robotics or trucking, is that safety has to be proven and it has to be better than today, than a human driver. And I think that's true from a regulatory standpoint as well. And it's certainly one of our biggest hopes, is to be able to reduce those accident rates for trucking. Regulatory is also a big issue, or a big question for a lot of this, but at this point, things are looking pretty good. If you look at the amount of purple on this map, it's increased over the last year or two, which is good. Those purple states are the ones that basically are letting trucking companies test and operate commercially autonomously, which you'll notice is pretty much the entire southern half of the US, except for California. The autonomous trucking companies are extremely interested in letting California, or having California let them test and operate commercially. Hasn't happened yet, but they're working on it. If that happens, that's going to open up the idea of going coast to coast across everything kind of south of the snow belt, which is kind of a dream as far as that goes, the entire I-10, I-20 corridors. And it's a huge opportunity even with that. Now again, longer term, of course, as the sensors get better and the computer vision improves, and they start showing more robust safety in drier climates, certainly the hope is to expand northwards as well. But there's still a huge opportunity just with the states that have already approved things. The focus for a lot of autonomous trucking companies, including the one that we're going to talk about right now, is in Texas because, again, there's pretty open roads. There's a ton of business moving between the cities of the Texas Triangle. The most trafficked Class 8 route in the entire country is Houston to Dallas. Every one of the autonomous trucking companies you hear about is going to have, be testing or have tested on that lane. And so there's just a lot of business in a fairly, kind of concentrated area there. As I mentioned, we have opportunities to work with all three of our, major truck operators at FedEx, and there's a ton of opportunity to scale those solutions, just given the size of our business. I had a lot of fun numbers on this. Our legal department asked that I remove them, but as you may guess, if you've driven the highways, we have thousands of trucks. No one should be terribly surprised by that. And there's a lot of opportunity if we can crack this, to basically put this out at scale nationwide across our terminal systems. Again, with the plan of this, we spent a lot of time basically choosing our dance partners, planning pilots. With trucking right now, we have an operational pilot today that's actually doing limited commercial operations for us. When we're doing a pilot in this case, yeah, we tested it for a couple weeks with empty trailers, but that didn't last long because we'd like to actually get some money for the operations that we're paying for. And so it's been moving commercial loads since before the beginning of this year. But our real big focus is how do we scale that into real commercial operations with scale, with dozens, hundreds, and perhaps one day thousands of trucks pulling commercial loads for us across the country. Specifically, the pilot I've been talking about is with Aurora Technologies. They've, like I said, been operating with us since, I believe it was November. They started doing daytime runs between Dallas and Houston. They moved that to nighttime, which is more compatible with a lot of our operations. And then we've also added another lane with them going from Fort Worth to El Paso, which is also a little bit more interesting just because it's about a 600-mile run between those cities. And they're doing those for us, the Dallas to Houston every day, Fort Worth to El Paso a couple times a week. And we're hoping to continue to scale that as soon as they have more trucks available, more or less. And they have a pretty, I'm going to say, reasoned and measured approach to commercialization of getting to more scale. The big thing that both of us are waiting on is for production-ready trucks from their OEM partners, where we can actually go out and purchase those in some numbers in probably the next few years would be the nicest way of putting that, and be able to hopefully integrate those in our operations at that standpoint. And again, given the other mission of my team, have those integrated into our IT and operations systems by that point as well. So it's very exciting stuff. I don't know if it's considered cool, but I think it's pretty interesting. Now I'll turn things over to Terry, I think is going to be speaking next, about much smaller vehicles.
Yes. Thank you. All right. Right there?
Yep, right there.
Okay, all right, there we go. All right, so as a former Tennessean. I started my career in Memphis and started my career with FedEx in Memphis. Thank you for welcoming me back. This has been a great conference. Definitely like the coalition of industry and academia and government. And, you know, definitely, I think you're doing a great thing here in Tennessee. I am based in Texas now. I work for the subsidiary FedEx office. And we are the retail arm of FedEx. So we have office and print centers and over 2,000 locations in the U.S. where FedEx shipping, where you also have access to FedEx shipping. So I'm happy to share today the work that I've been doing on developing a last mile service, specifically 5 miles or less, utilizing autonomous technology. And before I forget, you can reference a lot of information on Roxo at fedex.com/the-future. It's really important that you put "the" in front of future. So fedex.com/the-future. We all know what's going on or gone on with e-commerce demand. It's just ever increasing. You know, I think the pandemic accelerated even more of that. So we have an opportunity at FedEx to develop, you know, a same-day delivery solution using autonomy. We're using customer-driven design. We have a group of almost 10 customer advisory board customers that really signed on from the beginning, from the idea on a napkin that Fred Smith presented at these various top-to-top meetings. You know, and these are the retailers that you see they're trying, you know, it's not exclusivity that we have with them because they're all trying to solve it in all kinds of various ways with various partnerships or developing their own solutions. You know, everyone's trying to solve this. Our customer advisory board partners are those national retailers and the big box retailers that you all know, fast food, general merchandise, pharmacies, and an auto parts supplier that might also be based in Memphis. Mm-hmm. They're all looking for, you know, something that's easy to use, intuitive, and they're looking for, obviously, low cost shipping. At least, you know, the crowdsourced providers are providing this today, so at least parity with that. And then, you know, we believe if we're able to reach what we call breakthrough economics, that there's much more new demand that will be created when, you know, you could get shipping for potentially, same-day shipping for potentially a lower price point. You might think twice about getting in your car and running to the store to pick up those few items, you know, for a lower price. So introducing Roxo, which, fun fact, Roxo means purple in Portuguese. So there you go. But it is not a vehicle, it is a personal delivery device. And that definition is important because we need to distinguish, we aren't operating in lane on the road. It is meant to operate on the side of the road and on the sidewalk. And that's a differentiator for us in that we do have that flexibility to climb a curb, to move from the edge of the road to the sidewalk and back. And even among the smaller devices, you know, Roxo is sort of in the middle with our size and capability. There are bots, as Nick showed, Neuro, that does operate on road. And then you see all the ones that are on the campuses now that are really small and only operate on the sidewalk. We do plan human assistance, human monitoring and assistance for Roxo. So teleoperators who have the ability, who are constantly monitoring, and who have the ability to actually take control of an individual bot and drive it. You know, if the bot gets into a situation where it doesn't recognize that object or it does not know what to do, it would stop and call for help, and a teleoperator can remote in and take over. We at FedEx, obviously, you've heard about safety. You know, we are safety above all. That's one of our operating. It represents our culture of safety at FedEx. Our development vendor, DECA, DECA Research and Development Corporation. Many of you may be familiar with Dean Kamen. This is his company, and he's renowned inventor, probably best known for inventing the Segway. But he also has invented lots of things having to do with, I think he invented the first insulin pump. So things having to do with, and other things having to do with mobility. All right, and I have a little video if I can play it for you. This is our C3, our concept version 3 bot that you're watching here on the screen. The testing that we've done to date has included testing, obviously, and mostly testing in DECA's backyard of Manchester, New Hampshire, and in our backyard in Texas, Plano, Texas, and that surrounding North Dallas area where office is based. Actually, our first on-road tests outside of either of those areas was in Memphis, and we tested in 2 areas of Memphis. One from the FedEx Institute of Technology on the U of M campus to a FedEx office retail store on Poplar Avenue, and then also from the FedEx Forum downtown to a different FedEx office retail store that was close to the Peabody downtown. We do have chaperones. We have used chaperones to accompany the bot for all of our testing thus far, and we have a plan to progress through removing that close chaperone to a remote chaperone, and then to only teleoperator, and then obviously to one teleoperator is overseeing several bots. All right, so this is a view of our C4 concept bot, which we actually got an early look at a couple weeks ago up at DECA in Manchester. You'll notice it looks a little bit different. You can't see the front and the back, but we are removing those screens, the screens from the front and the back, and in lieu of those, we're adding a touch screen to the side. One of the things we found out in earlier tests was that people really wanted that human-bot interaction. They wanted the ability, and they kept actually trying to touch the other screens, which weren't touch screen. So this will have that human-bot interaction. It just wasn't enough to have a smartphone and open it from your smartphone. What if left it inside? I got to go back and get it. So that was definitely a learning that we had. We also have new sensors and changed sensors. On the C3, we had a lot of ultrasonic sensors, and found that those, were just not as useful and had a lot of noise. And so we went with radars. So we have now we have short-range radars, long-range radars, a lot of different sensors, so that we have redundancy and we have that sensor fusion for the bot to know where it is. So, various different cameras. We've got stereo cameras. We've got LiDAR on the top. We've got cameras. Our teleoperators can actually see the same view that Roxo is seeing through all these cameras on their user interface. Roxo is taller. It's just over 5 feet tall. And so it is easily viewed by cars, bicyclists, other pedestrians. and that's one of the things that people have told us that they do like, is that it does, the smaller ones are harder to see. They're not at eye level. We do use lithium-ion batteries today, but obviously, like everyone else, we're actively pursuing next-gen battery design for more utilization. The base of our bot is it is actually the same base as the iBot wheelchair. The iBot was invented by DECA. One of the benefits of that is it actually that base itself already had over 10 million hours on it in operation as a Class 3 medical device when Roxo was announced and launched. So, and another side benefit is, if we're successful with this and we can manufacture, that's a very costly wheelchair. And, if we're able to manufacture these, it'll drive down the cost of those wheelchairs as well. Okay. The service journey, this is our first use case that we're enabling. I won't go through this. You can kind of see for yourself, but just wanted to point out that we do envision the first use case will be 1-for-1, so one delivery, one delivery per trip. No multi-stop at this point. These are, we plan for them to reside or be domiciled at the retailer store. That's one of the big benefits as well, is there's no first leg of transportation for someone to come to the store. It's there. The order comes in, the store team member loads it. All the data that you're used to getting around tracking of packages with FedEx today, will enable tracking of the bot on its way to you through web apps. So delivers and it returns. Potentially in the future, returns of packages is a big thing. Hopefully we plan to resolve that, and then unattended deliveries as well. And the last thing I'll cover is in the community, we know that adoption of these, we won't be successful if we don't have societal acceptance. And so it's very key. We do have PDD, so personal delivery device legislation, that's been passed now in 20 states, including Tennessee, where we have the ability to operate. So, which is very important, in order to offer this as a service to our customers, to offer their consumers, we needed that ability to operate throughout the state. But we know we won't be successful if we just go in, ramshot and so we plan a community liaison program where we'll work with local municipalities, and we're doing that in the North Texas area as well, to just engage with the municipalities and then educate communities because there is that acceptance that is needed. Some activities that we've already done through our community liaison program are first responder demonstrations and discussions. And through some of those, the fire department's, giving us some pointers and things on lithium-ion batteries and things to think about locking them. Those could be stolen. You need to make sure how they're accessible. We do STEM and school presentations. You wouldn't believe the kids ask great questions. We do a lot of support of Dean Kamen started a FIRST robotics. It's where teams starting in elementary and through high school, they form teams that compete in robotics competition. So we try to support FIRST as much as we can. Area and neighborhood meet and greets, particularly if it's somewhere where we're going to test, offering, putting out information and offering, we'll be at this area school, come ask us questions, come see the bot in person. And then we work with city managers and traffic engineers. We're working on integrating with pedestrian signal lights currently. Okay, well, that's it about Roxo, and I'll turn it over to Angie Weimeyer, and she's going to talk about electrification and activities and goals. Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So just as a reminder, what I do, my team does, is we focus on electrification, so taking you out of the AV world to the EV world. And we look at, as industry research, we look at the industry, at the technology, and what are the risks, challenges, opportunities broadly, and what do they mean for FedEx? What might be a business value that we can find either in enabling us to move forward or for making even better benefits, financial benefits out of moving forward with EVs. So there, I think, are a number of benefits that we're still finding out about electrification. And you know, one of them, I think it's great, we have the EV demos over here and we don't hear them. That's one of the great benefits of it. I think drivers, you know, we do face a driver shortage, but drivers will, in the interim, they'll actually enjoy driving the EVs. That's been one of the experiences that's come forward. Obviously, climate is a really important reason for all of us to be focusing on EVs. But for us as a business at FedEx, our reason is total cost of ownership. It's a financial reason. So when you look at the cost associated with operating our vehicle fleet, we have, of course, the labor cost that's involved that you know, may be altered in terms of the AV world. But in terms of the EV world, it's really about the cost of running the vehicle. And so with these all being proportional costs of running our vehicles, fuel and maintenance and repair are the two areas that EVs can reduce, with the asset cost needing to come down in order to let those vehicle and maintenance repair costs overcome them. Maintenance and repair, we believe that will be reduced because EVs have 40% less moving parts than their diesel counterparts. So at FedEx, our goal is for carbon neutrality by 2040, and this is our approach to moving forward with that. Our first part of that approach is to focus on directly on our assets, our owned assets. And those are airplanes, vehicles, and the charging infrastructure or any other fueling infrastructure. Airplane technology is moving more slowly, but in the case of vehicles and infrastructure, infrastructure can get ready to support both, but we are moving forward with these areas. But at the same time, we are moving on to this second part of this, which is influencing contractors. So that could be, in some of our business models, that can be service providers. We also contract with rail, as I think we mentioned, and with, we have purchase transportation, so we contract out to other trucking companies on occasion. So, but also because we do focus on carbon neutrality, there's also the energy source that we want to influence. So influencing utilities in terms of using coal, and looking at green hydrogen as hydrogen may become relevant for us. So with those two being our first areas of focus, they all serve then into this third area, which is to minimize what we may need to offset.
Can I run around in this, or do I
FedEx
need to,
has
stay
invested
back here?
in Yale University in a project on
but I can,
carbon
move about.
sequestration, otherwise known as carbon capture. To, you know, especially as we realized with airplanes, we're probably not going to have an electric airplane fleet by 2040. So carbon capture would be a way to offset that. Oh, there we go. So again, focusing on the fact that our goal is carbon neutrality. There are many fleets out there that talk about a goal of zero emissions, and that's a great goal as well. But ours goes a step further toward that carbon neutrality, and therefore when we look at different options for our fleet, it's the far right two that we're interested in focusing on, because we don't only want a vehicle that is zero emissions, we also want the energy source behind it to be clean. So in the case of battery electric, of course, that means renewable sources, and in the case of hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles, that would mean green
They had an
hydrogen.
extra mic, so they were like, you go
And
back
I think
and
there's
go
still
ahead
a
and
lot
get
of
yours done. And I was like,
research going on and different ways to produce, to generate green hydrogen, so also an area of interest and research for us. One of the challenges as we look to operationalize use of electric vehicles, and we connect to a lot of industry fleets, we know that the battery is going to take some additional focus. So what's was kind of known in the research lab and is being experienced on the road in pilots and the first steps at operationalization are the two aspects of the battery. So one is how you operate the vehicle and how that affects the battery. So a couple of the, probably the most impactful things, there's a short list of things that it can impact the charge of a battery. The ones that fleets are finding are the biggest impacts are cold temperatures when you need to heat. That creates a very strong drain.
Some people do
and then the other thing is driver behavior. And those driver behavior can impact up to 25% of state of charge. So those two things are things I think will get increasing focus as fleets operationalize with electric vehicles. Then in the case of the battery lifetime, state of health, how we charge the vehicle can have a dramatic impact on how long the battery lasts. So, typical industry knowledge is to charge between 20 and 80%. Some say 25 and 75%. And then, of course, it can depend what kind of charging. Is it level 2? Is it DC fast charging? And then, of course, the industry is trying to move, especially for semi-trucks, into megawatt charging. And depending on the size of the battery, that can actually be a strong impact on battery life.
And I saw her for dinner a few weeks ago, like probably a week before the
So
announcement.
one of the factors that makes electrification complex for FedEx is the size of our fleet, which is over 200,000 vehicles. It's also the composition of our fleet. We have class sizes from 2 through 8, meaning anything from above a passenger vehicle to a semi-truck. We, amongst all of the operating companies of FedEx, we have all of those sizes of vehicles. And then, of course, the application of the vehicles, which is parcel pickup and delivery, and also line haul. What I don't have listed on here is, of course, that we also have off-road vehicles. So we have forklifts, we have yard hostlers, things like that, things that you don't normally see within our operations.
Good luck.
So as we move forward, this is our path to electrification, in that we have been, and we're involved in all of these, and they will run into each other. They're not clean segmentations, but we work on piloting different vehicle technology, different EVs, again, across different class sizes and applications. And then a big, huge effort of installing all of the charging infrastructure and making decisions around that. And that can be different for different operating companies within FedEx, based on business models or the kind of operations they have. And then as we go to actually convert our fleet from diesel into purchasing electric vehicles, the technology that's most available today is the parcel pickup and delivery vehicles, the pickup and delivery vans you see in your neighborhoods, and then moving on to line haul and off-road vehicles. So I think this is kind of the same process, the same path that we talked about for autonomous vehicles. It may look a little bit different. We'll see whether Darren's work moves forward faster or Terry's work in terms of the small versus the larger. But they do have an order. So my team, again, focused on industry research. We want to understand the broad field. What are the risks, challenges, opportunities? And so these are all of the areas that we focus on to make sure we really understand what can happen also down the road or far, far upstream from the challenges and the choices we face. And so one of them is vehicle production. I think this morning somebody was saying, if we can just get a hold of those EVs off the production line, that's the hard part. So vehicle production is one of the challenges, especially with all the supply chain issues going on today. So that's something that we look at a lot, and is there anything we can do to impact that, particularly for FedEx? Then battery technology, that's a whole host of supply chain issues and technology evolution issues, and we want to continually look forward to, with this rapid pace of evolution, how do we mitigate risks and how do we have that deep awareness of what's next. Then charging infrastructure in particular is an area that is very complex. When you look at, it's not only the charging infrastructure itself and looking at, will we move from the actual charging EVSE today to wireless charging, as we heard about earlier. There's also the upstream. We heard a little bit about the utility grid and will it be able to move forward. It also, I think is generally looking to convert to renewable sources, and so there will be that challenge as well. And then lastly is government. So regulatory pathways, which especially is important for AV, incentives, and in general funding, whether it's federal funding or more localized funding. So my team, in understanding this space, one of the things that we do in our research is also explore different proof of concepts to be able to see what the newest technologies look like for us. And so one of the things that we're doing is working with Lane College on a charging infrastructure test bed. As Lane College seeks to electrify their campus. They're based in Jackson, Tennessee, 2 hours west of here on the way to Memphis. And we've started working with them, have an intern with us as well already this summer. And we'll be moving forward with them and have a microgrid test bed as well that we can start to begin to look at what that will look like for FedEx as we turn inward. So lastly, I wanted to mention one of the things also, as we talk to other fleets, that is one of the biggest challenges for electrification and something we want to be cognizant of. And I think we're hearing a lot about that amongst the conversation here at 10 Smart Expo, but just to highlight it very specifically, is the relationships that have to connect. And certainly for specific implementation projects, we hear from fleets and have experienced that ourselves, that connecting within teams internally and then also externally with different parties and continually doing that as you move along in implementation projects is the biggest success factor. So doing that is really the key to being able to move forward. And I think with AV is the same story for that with smart mobility. It may be different groups that are more important. Perhaps information technology might be more important, for example, or legal. But all of these areas are important. So we connect in all of these ways amongst our teams and outward as well. Thank you.
Get to the sun.
All right, well, if y'all don't mind, I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to ask you all, and then we'll open up the floor to the audience to ask questions. So our first question today is, what challenges do you expect as you move forward with implementing the solutions you discussed today?
It's like good to be standing by your bike with your hat and.
I think that
You got some stickers.
the
Oh, that
challenges.
one's nice.
I mean, there's no shortage of challenges. I'll start from an autonomous
steal
vehicle
sunglasses
perspective.
from
I
my
think I outlined a
sunglasses
few of those in the presentation itself. Everything from the technology itself to the regulatory landscape to how do we think about commercialization, how do we think about risk management. All of those things are not been solved at 100%. But having said that, I think we think that we can still make meaningful progress in introducing both electrification and autonomy in the real world while keeping it commercially viable and profitable to us, and grow it over time. So it's going to require a lot of, surgical precision in how we deploy it, where we deploy it, and how we grow it over time. It is not, none of these things are short ROI type projects, and so especially from the industry, the business sector, it requires
think
a
so.
different kind of thinking from our leadership as
And
well,
it's
as to the
Kate's
investment that
sister.
we're making today, and
Alex
and
Logan
realizing
used to
that
work
it's
in
for the
Health
long run.
Strategies, and they got married in
Anyone else like
very
to add to
cute.
that?
They met at Health Strategies. They were colleagues, and then they were like,
Great answer.
in love with
Okay,
each other,
so
and we
next
all used to,
question,
like,
how
be
and
like,
when can these
got
innovations
together, and
benefit
then they got
residents
married.
of Tennessee?
and then we all went to the wedding, and it was the drunkest I've ever been at a
I
wedding in my life.
can take a little bit of that. First of all,
So
I think it's
10,
already
20,
benefiting
20,
us
it
mostly
was
because we have
the month
really cool
before the
jobs
pandemic,
and happen to be
February
residents of
2020.
Tennessee. But other than
That was
that,
when we were all
a lot
like,
of the commercialization timelines are probably 2 to 3 years before we
That was
start
what
seeing
that
things
was.
at scale.
That was what happened there.
And hopefully by that time, supply chains will be a little bit less disrupted, and we'll be able to accelerate like the normalization of that, reducing the cost of logistics and making our highways and roads safer.
The one thing I would add, though, is that with all the automation that we're doing, both in materials handling and in transportation, we
Did
have
not memorize the
no doubt
questions. I have them
whatsoever
written
that we're not going to
in my notebook.
stop hiring people or reduce our workforce.
Of which I need
It's
to
just
steal
going to
another
be a
one. I love
different
these notebooks. They're
category
my
of job.
favorite. They're very-
The logistics industry, the e-commerce
Yeah,
world is
it's
growing
nice.
fast
They're,
enough
like,
to where we
moldable.
will have more and more jobs. There will be better jobs that people
were
want to
talking
do, and we're already thinking about partnerships in order to source these kind of jobs with universities, with training institutions, and so forth. So in that, from that standpoint, I think, and with Tennessee's ambition of being a R&D hub
probably is
for
a Nick, but it's
mobility,
not the right Nick.
and the work that we're doing,
like
I
a
think
Brian.
that's a great fit. And overall, the state is going to benefit in terms of both jobs and in terms of consumer benefits.
Great.
I think,
Me too.
it was interesting, the map that Darren showed earlier about AV and how it's moving forward
Get
as
fun
far as
shoes on.
regulations opening the door. California was essentially kind of the weak link, but in the EV world, California, everything is focused on
Raise the roof.
California, and so, I think an event like TenSmart starts to seed that excitement about Tennessee in terms of, we want to electrify. We're very active. We want to get funding. All of those things that can get the focus outside of California and say utilities are ready, things like that. That's how fleets, a lot of the fleets that I talk to, that's how we're oriented is who's ready, who's excited about this, who is ready. And so, I think it's important to say Tennessee is one of those places.
Yeah,
Sounds-
to chime in there, Padma and I were talking a little bit last night, and, I think just like this event, the coalition of working together
Get
to
irritated
attract
when they talk about the
it,
I-24
and the
Because I get irritated.
real world test beds. And I think someone said it earlier today, industry, we want to
Yeah,
test
I'm
in the
sure.
real world. So having those
I'm-
real world environments that are
everyone talks about it, I'm
conducive to
like,
that, and offering that, and that was one thing I was talking with
And they're
Padma
like,
last
no,
night
no, no,
was,
it's on the interstate.
you know,
Really?
real world testing at scale, the ability to offer that
I was like,
and kind of the ecosystem to support
sometimes
that
I'm just like,
would be good.
Yeah. All right, next question will be, how do you see TDOT, TenSmart, and I think we kind of touched on this a little bit, but how can TenSmart and other government
bigger
agencies
person
and
than me.
public-private
just like,
partnerships facilitate and bringing these innovations to the
I'm like,
market
you
in
know
a
they've been
timely
doing it
way?
for a while. Not here.
I think I did touch upon that. It's the
Oh,
whole
yeah,
reason
those
for
were
us being
exciting.
here.
Emily took two of those.
Can't
She was-
emphasize enough
she was
how
bummed.
much those partnerships
She was like-
are significant.
I mean, I took 3 pairs as well.
we are just one company,
I have no
and
ground to stand
many
on
of these
here.
challenges are beyond, however
I
big
was like, I
FedEx
take these
might
to my
be.
cabin.
Many of these
Is
challenges
it
are
okay for
beyond
me to
us
take multiple?
alone.
And they were like, yeah, we
So
don't
again,
want any
this
of
is
this.
exactly
And I
the
was
kind
like,
of relationship that we need with the academia, with
like,
government, and between the public and private sector. And we are already having a lot of conversations with TDOT, with TVA, and with several universities in trying to solve specific problems.
yeah.
Great. And then last question is, how does this impact your workforce? What educational expectations or needs are changing as a result with these new technologies? So that was, again, just something that you kind of touched on, but if you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, one of the things that comes up a lot, especially in the robotics area, is the classic jobs that you want robots to do are dirty, dangerous, and dull. And specifically for us, a lot of the things that we target in terms of automation are jobs that have the highest turnover. Like even the people who are working for us don't want to do those because they are all three of those things. And so again, we have more and more work to give people. That's not the problem. The point is, how do we make that work less awful? Like some of those jobs are truly awful. And if we can automate those and put those people to work doing better things, more fulfilling things, so much the better. And to that degree also, all the things that we're talking about, these robotic, whether it's a robot in one of our facilities or whether they're autonomous vehicles, they still have to have people involved in them. And those jobs are in most cases going to be more of a supervisory thing involving some degree of maintenance. And so they're a better job than what they're replacing. And that's, again, really the hope for a lot of this. And we're already seeing that in some of our deployments of things as well. So a lot of expectations about future workforce, absolutely. Ones that know more about, more technicians, more engineers, and more people that are just familiar and able to work with high technology and are more excited about logistics, honestly.
I have enjoyed
historically,
following all the drama
innovation
about
has
West
always created jobs,
that was
creates
all
just different
released, which I was like,
types of
"You've
jobs. And
never
just, I
met
think
Weston,"
about
is like, "Oh, he
with
definitely said something
our
like
device
sexist
and
and
the
racist.
teleoperator
Like,
role. I
guaranteed.
mean, we're, targeting or to need a lot of these devices and lots of teleoperators.
Yeah.
So maybe gaming, maybe people who have
The guy
gaming
that's running
experience
for
might come
county
in.
mayor that was
Yeah, well, and I think, I mean,
Okay.
this is, like we talked about
Oh,
this
it was,
morning,
yeah.
I mean, we're in the middle of an evolution. This is one of the opportunity areas is we can create
he's probably my
better
age.
jobs and, better opportunities for
Yeah.
a stronger workforce for Tennessee.
and he's
So,
like
Yeah,
his
and
dad
in
was a
the case of
politician. He's never
electrification,
done
it's not
tech.
necessarily a
Like,
new
truly
type of
nothing.
job like a teleoperator, but it's just altering existing jobs. It doesn't make
They
the
do, like,
driver not a
water
driver, for example, but like I said before, it may be a more pleasant experience for them because they experience that they don't have the same noise, they don't have the same, like in a
His dad
semi-truck,
was
they
a
generally
congressman.
vibrate.
He
They don't
has
have the
done
same vibration, and so they don't
But
feel
he's
that in their
run
bodies
for a
at the
bunch
end of the
political
workday.
offices, and he usually
So
loses.
oftentimes drivers,
But he
some
won
of
this one.
them
And the-
are very
and the
excited to
real-
try an
the
EV,
real,
but
like,
others, they're
problem
not,
with winning this one is
they're
that
having
now,
to go
like,
through training and they're not
it gives
excited
them,
about
like, a
switching from
legitimate
something
thing on
that
his
they were
resume
very
to, like,
familiar with, but
leverage
once they
into-
do, it's a good
into it.
experience. And the same thing I
Like,
think will
'cause he's
go
run for, like,
for, we do our
Chuck
own
Fleischman's
maintenance and repair on our vehicles. So
Jobs with
those folks
Charlie.
will have a sea change in the
Charlie
way they
endorsed
do the
him. He's
work,
24,
and they'll have to be
running for Chuck
trained for that,
Fleischman's
and that
seat,
may
like,
be
being
a little
terrible.
bit of discomfort,
we're
but when they do
taking
it, they
him,
have
and then that
something new and
caused, like-
exciting to focus
And then he
on.
tried to get Charlie's job at Launch Tennessee, and Charlie announced he was
I believe that is all the questions that I have, so we'll open it up to the floor if anyone would like to ask our panel
And they
some
were like,
questions.
that's not actually how it works.
I have a question on electrification. Electrical feasibility is not even close to 100%. But costs are coming down, technology is getting
I mean,
better.
it ends in
that
all
number is
roads
definitely
lead to
going
county
up.
mayor, so.
But there's another really expensive price point,
I
and
don't know,
that's
he's
the
gonna make it
charging
look like living hell.
infrastructure.
It'll be a
And
vibe.
the most cost-effective way to do that is all at once.
Oh, yeah.
So when FedEx is looking at their warehouses and their depots, how are you guys thinking about really like ripping up the concrete one time, putting in the infrastructure one time, and future-proofing for when maybe it's 30% today, but 100% feasibility in 5 years from now? Like, what's the thought process? What are the considerations that y'all are doing now? to plan for the future?
Good.
Yeah, there's two things in particular I'd mention with regard to that. One is that
We could just call it.
we've made adjustments as we build new facilities. So already the engineering plans
It feels
for
like a
any
whole,
new
like,
facilities
sunset
that are
thing. Are you gonna,
built,
like, freak out
we're
and
doing it
drink
from
a
the
bunch
beginning.
tonight?
So we don't have to
Yeah,
go in
it
and
seems-
tear it up and incur that expense.
Oh, yeah.
Or buildings that are already under construction that we're doing that proactively, and so that helps us. It also creates more of a piecemeal effect, rather because it is, an undertaking to do everything all at once. And in our estimates of total cost of ownership benefit, we do put in those charging infrastructure costs. So we believe there is still, of course, you have to do it wisely, but there is still a total cost of ownership benefit when all is said and done. The other thing I'd mention is, there are so many models for as a service. And so you could completely, for charging infrastructure, you could have everything from one end to the other be,
so I just picked up the new
from the
Leanne
utility
Fort
to the
Perry book. She's
vehicle.
like,
You can have that
like
be
those
as a
for, like, a nice,
service,
like, light read.
or you
I'm
can
also a big, like,
build
Vanity
out
Fair
the entire
person. Like, I love a good
infrastructure
Vanity
of the
Fair,
facility,
read it
of
cover to
that
cover,
site,
all of the
and
articles.
simply have the
Very well done.
EVSE be
That is
the
what I'll be
as a
doing
service.
at the Capitol
So we
this
look at
weekend.
that, and of course we have a multidimensional business, so different operating companies are looking at that differently.
beautiful.
But that's one way, we hedge against
my,
the future. It's
my
one
in-laws
way
just
that
came
we
in
may be able to
from
move
Kentucky and
faster.
You're
So
gonna think
those
we're
are some of
so,
our
like, redneck. When
considerations.
you come over, they just dropped off like a stock tank that they had like sitting around their house, and I was like, "Hey, can I have that?" And they were like, "Yeah, I mean, we'll just bring it down." And I was like, "That'd be great." And then I was like, Joe,
For the,
take the stock
and you may
tank
have said
like,
this and I may have
turn
missed it,
into,
the
like, a
Aurora
little
trucks,
pool for us
there's
in
a
the
driver in
backyard."
that,
And he
is
was
that
like,
right?
"Great." So Joe's working on it.
Currently, yes. Aurora, I mean, so far in the industry, there's only one company that's publicly said that they've done any testing with no safety driver at all. Aurora today, yeah, they actually have 2 people on board. One is a safety driver. Aurora has very high standards of who they're hiring because it's actually a very boring job most of the time. Because they're sitting here literally, they're not even in their hands in their lap. The hands are literally about half an inch off the steering wheel. So they tend to be, they hire very experienced drivers. And alongside that, there's actually a technician or
Mine
engineer
is
in the
called, like,
right-hand seat
Sweet Southern
monitoring the
Retreat,
autonomous
and it is, like,
system
a
and its
log
plan,
cabin and
its driving plan as they're going
Airbnb
along.
it.
And so they'll actually be calling out the predicted maneuvers, the
real
planned
nice, and we had
maneuvers of the
18
vehicle,
acres,
so
so
that
it's
the
like
safety driver, the
quiet
driver is sitting
and
there, okay, I know what's going to happen.
lease
And in
the
some
front part
cases,
to
they're
the
actually going to
neighbors with
modify or
cows.
tag
The
things as,
cows are out
it wanted to
there,
do
and people
this,
get
but we
very
thought it was a
excited
better
about
idea.
cows.
And that's one of the ways that they train them.
There's, like, wild
But yeah,
turkeys.
today
I'm excited
every one of
about
them
that.
has 2 people in the cab. And that is one of the big questions is, when do they feel that their autonomy progression and the amount of time between manual interventions has reached a point where they can start trialing that without a driver on board.
And how do they log the miles?
do, like, a
Is
honey
it the driver
situation.
miles? How do they log those?
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite
The
hear
driver miles, how do they log them? The safety driver, does he have to log his miles?
that. Yeah, that's a good question.
bee
To be
thing.
honest, I'm not
They're
100%
like,
sure on
we're
that,
doing our
of how they're actually accomplishing that.
Or
I mean,
hours, I
again,
should
they're
say.
fully licensed CDL drivers, so they're capable of driving the vehicle and pretty long tenure in the industry.
Thank you.
Do you watch? I am not like an active.
Good
participant in
afternoon,
TikTok,
Ben
but I
Kessler
occasionally
with
look
ChargePoint.
scroll.
Appreciate the presentation,
There's
and I
a
think my
woman
question
on
might be
there,
for
like,
Angela.
Texas Bee Works, and
You know,
she's, like,
knowing
the
that you guys
person
are
that gets
involved
called
in the
out when
regulatory
somebody, like,
space or
finds a
government
random
affairs
bee
space,
swarm
and
or hive.
you know, knowing
she
that
has
the
this very, like,
fleet of FedEx is very
ASMR,
large and that
quiet
you're going to have to
voice,
charge
and
all
she'll be
these
like,
things.
"And then I keep the bees."
What type of activity or where is FedEx at with being involved
And,
in
like,
some
it's
of
like a
the
video of
regulatory
her
proceedings
moving.
around
It's
rate
very
design
nice.
to
I was like,
mitigate demand
"Bees."
charges or kilowatt hour pricing for fleet charging? Thank you.
I'm not deeply involved in that, so I don't have a great answer for that. We've done studies to understand what the different utilities are doing across the map, to be able to assess where we can, where we need to step in and have a conversation a little bit more in order to move forward with our plans. But there's also stationary storage, and that's an important consideration for mitigating the peak charging hit and the charge demand software. So that's the technology angle for managing, how we charge our fleets in a way.
I had to email.
I'm sure you're familiar with that.
I was just like, you can't have this budget today. I'm really sorry. It'll be Monday. I can't do it.
Thank you for presentations. I was
Monday. I was like,
thinking about the notion of reducing jobs and with the country almost at full employment and many companies not being able to hire people, especially for truck drivers, this was going on long before the pandemic. At what point do you think the argument changes from, well, you know, we're going to retrain people to get other jobs to, we need to do this because we can't find people to work? And it seems like to me that, you know, we're pretty close to that point, and with all the baby boomers retiring, it seems like we're not necessarily going back to the levels of workers that we had before. Thank you.
I couldn't hear the last part. What was the point that you were referring to? What was the turning point that you were referring to?
The baby boomers retiring and the workforce being much smaller in the long term than it has been in the past.
Yeah, they might.
Yeah, I mean, that's the crux of the challenge that we have today. And it's, you know, both the preference for those driving jobs,
Sometimes people do
as
that,
well
though,
as,
and I'm always like,
and by preference, you know,
like a
there
game
are
show
companies
host.
like
I'm just like,
FedEx and UPS who do go above and beyond in terms of making sure that the drivers have reasonable work hours and can come back home, but a lot of them really you know, have to spend half their lives in the cab of the truck. And then the mystery of where is everybody gone in the last 2 years is still very much a mystery to us. So with, you know, short answer, we are scratching our heads ourselves, but we do think that when it comes to line haul trucking in particular, we may be approaching that point of no return.
oh yeah, you're like, this is a one destination.
So this is Ping from Tennessee Tech. I have hopefully several questions I may ask. So first thing first, it seems like the FedEx had already early in this advanced technology, including the AV and electrifications. I mean, as one of the biggest logistic companies, I'm hoping the FedEx can share some of the learnings, the best practice about which technology to serve which applications to a lot of smaller trucking companies in certain forms, certain communication channels, so that all these trucking fleets, big or small, can all benefit from that. Because I know FedEx is very open to trying this technology, but based on my personal conversation, there are some other big logistic companies, they may not want to in the game participate resource on that. So there's a lot of, I think, FedEx can do in terms of leveraging the leadership and the learnings to help our state to adopt the technology as a whole. I think that's something I recommend, but I hope FedEx can spend some efforts in that to share those learning. That's my first thing. And secondly, a lot of the technology seems to be demonstrated in urban, bigger cities. As we saw a lot of the aged, you know, population in the rural areas, and a lot of technology I saw that can benefit from those communities. And in fact,
it's a dwindled crowd.
I was wondering if in the future we can spare some of the resource or efforts to do some demonstration to serve those underserved rural community. I think those, I believe, is from the mobility equity or from equity perspective. I think, in my opinion, I do a lot of rural electrification space. I think they need to be concerned. Those issues need to be concerned, and hopefully the FedEx can get into that space as well. The last one is the collaborations with universities. I was wondering what type of collaborations FedEx can accept in terms of working with the universities. I know university has its own unique in terms of workforce training, do some research and development in certain forms. For example, vehicle routing programs for electric vehicle. And can you comment? so far I just saw general information about working with university. I need, can you specify some of the forms? Thank you.
I can speak to a couple of those. We are part of a fleet forum. It's not a Tennessee-focused fleet forum, but that's where, you know, when I've spoken in my presentation a little bit about what other fleets are experiencing, that's the sharing that's going on is, oh wow, driver behavior has a huge impact on state of charge. Things like that are things that we're sharing, and I think that, I agree, that needs to continue for the industry to be able collectively to have an impact to the other person's question. So yeah, I think that is an important piece of the picture. And then as far as universities, as I mentioned, we are, you know, my team is working with Lane College, and Professor Greg Emery is here. Hopefully, you know, a future Tennessee Smart Expo, we'll be talking about that because we're just getting started on it. But really, you know, that's what our broader team does, is we're, you know, we do work with universities where we can, where it makes sense. And that's a great piece of the work, is to be able to have a test bed. So I don't think there's any limitations necessarily on it. It's just when it is it the right fit for gaining learnings?
I'll do whatever.
Yeah.
Also, am I
to your
introducing them? Or
point
do I-
about
I don't have
the
anything
first two
on them
points about
to introduce them.
you know, sharing our experience and our learnings with the smaller trucking companies, and
Yeah, can
perhaps
I just
even,
have
you know,
them?
trialing things
just
in
have- I
rural
can just
areas.
have them
I think
intro
we
themselves.
agree with that. We should be doing that. The constraint we have right now is the trucking or the technology partner, right? In particular, when it comes to the AV industry,
So I have
there is a unreasonable amount of confidentiality involved. Sometimes we don't know with our technology partner, you know, exactly how things work, right? And
Yeah, I mean, I
it's
would
just
have
because
them
the
introduce
newness
themselves in context
of
with
the
this first
industry,
question about like the expo's been a
everybody's
celebration.
trying to
All of your roles help lead
you know,
R&D. Can you talk a little about
protect
your
their
role?
intellectual property and pull out ahead. I think the industry has, the leaders have consolidated enough to where now to bridge the gap between 98% and 100% where we need to.
It does matter.
Sharing of knowledge and standardization of some processes in the AV world is probably the best way forward, but it hasn't happened yet. So I completely agree, and then, you know, that should be shared with, and the learnings, operational learnings for the industry should be shared.
Thank you, Nick.
Yeah. Again, on the why are we doing those tests where we're doing, and that tend to be largely urban areas? It's mainly because right now so far it's been a function of where the freight moves, right? But and autonomous vehicles in particular, given the size and limitations that we've been working with, they don't make good candidates for driving long distances. They make better business sense for driving short distances and doing lots of pickups and deliveries. But we think that drone testing is one area where and FedEx Express already has a program that I think is ideally suited for rural environments, and we'll probably hear more on that in the future.
Yeah, I'm aware of that program. Thanks.
All right, well, I think that's a great stopping point for our session. Thank you all for that discussion, and for letting us and our audience know a little bit more about FedEx's leading efforts and the way that you all are continuing to innovate and hold yourselves accountable for positive change. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.